Okay, in this particular video, we're going to start the unit on parallel lines. What it means when lines are parallel, what is a transversal, and the different pairs of angles that can be related in some type of way when you're dealing with parallel lines. So if we start off first, okay, so we have this picture on the paper. We have three different lines in the picture. We have line J, line K, and line L with 8 different numbered angles. So in the picture, if you remember, okay, even back from grade school, parallel lines are two or more lines, I should say, that don't intersect. So in this particular picture, if I highlight them, your parallel lines are lines J and line K. Again, those two lines are parallel, they do not intersect. Okay, so with respect to your parallel lines, interior angles are angles that are between your two lines. So in this particular picture, again, my two lines are lines J and K that are parallel. So if I'm talking about interior angles, I'm talking about all these angles between them. So the angles that are between them in this particular picture are going to be angles 4 in any particular order, angle 3, angle 5, and angle 6. Okay, those again are interior angles. They're angles that are between your two lines. So now, if interior angles are angles that are between your two lines, exterior angles are going to be your angles that are not between your two lines. So in this particular picture, your exterior angles are going to be angles 1, angles 2, angles 8, and angle 7. Okay, so interior are between your lines, exterior are not between your two lines. Now the other one we're going to talk about before we hit transversal are adjacent angles. If you remember before, adjacent angles are angles that have a common vertex and a common side, but no common interior point. So they're right next to each other. In some ways we talk about them in reference to next door neighbors. So if you look at the picture, angle 2, let me erase that there. So angle 2 and angle 1 are considered adjacent angles because of the fact that they have a common vertex and a common side. So the vertex for angles 1 and 2 are right here in red there, and they have a common side that goes kind of up and to the right there. Okay, so again, one pair of adjacent angles in the picture are angles 1 and angle 2. Now there are plenty of them that are adjacent in the picture. Another pair of adjacent angles could be like angle 6 and angle 7. Notice angle 6 and 7 in the picture have this common vertex and share this side. So we said 1 and 2 are adjacent. We could say angles 2 and 3 are adjacent. 3 and 4 are adjacent. 4 and 1 are adjacent. Etc. So adjacent angles have a common vertex and a common side. Okay, now, transversal is my next word. To be a transversal is a line that intersects two or more lines at different points. So you can see in this particular picture, line L, which is this one here, is going to be my transversal. It intersects lines J and line K at 2 different points, one here and one there. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, what's a non-example of a transversal? Well, a non-example would look something like this. If you think about like an asterisk or like your star, do you see here how all of the lines intersect at the same point? So this is not an example of a transversal. So transversal is like this picture over here. You're going to have a transversal that's going to intersect 2 other lines at different points. Okay, so again, that's my transversal. So if I continue on here, after transversal we have remote interior angles. Now, to be remote interior angles, they have to be interior. Okay, so I have to pick from angles 4, 3, 5, and 6. Okay, to be alternate interior angles, okay, they have to both be interior angles and on opposite sides of the transversal, and they cannot be adjacent. So usually we talk about it in terms of non-adjacent. So in our picture, Notice angle 4 is an interior angle. It's on the left side of the transversal, and 3 is adjacent to it, so I can't pick angle 3. I can pick angle 6, because 6 is an interior angle as well. 6 is on the right side of the transversal. So one pair of alternate interior angles in the picture is going to be angles 4 and 6. We also have another pair of alternate interior angles in the picture. Okay, instead of talking about 4 and 6, we also have angles 3 and 5. 3 and 5 are still interior angles. 3 is on the right side of the transversal, 5 is on the left. And again, they are non-adjacent to each other. So my other pair is going to be, like I said, angles 3 and 6. So those are both, not 3 and 6, 3 and 5. Okay, so those are both pairs of alternate interior angles. So alternate interior angles are two angles, two interior angles. They have to be non-adjacent on opposite sides of the transversal. Okay, so next we have alternate exterior angles. Alternate exterior angles, in comparison to alternate interior angles, they have to be exterior angles. They are also non-adjacent, and they are on opposite sides of the transversal. So in this picture here, we would say angle 1 and angle 7 are alternate interior angles. Notice 1 and 7 are exterior, and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. Angle 1's on the left side, and angle 7 is on the right side. Another pair of alternate exterior angles in the picture is going to be angles 2 and angle 8. Notice they're both exterior angles. 2 is on the right side of the transversal, 8 is on the left side. Okay, so I talked about them. Now let's write them in the picture. So alternate exterior angles, we said were angles 1 and 7, as well as angle 2 and 8. So there's two pairs of alternate exterior angles in the picture. Okay, so next we have what we call corresponding angles. Corresponding angles are angles, I know I'm using the word corresponding, but they're in the corresponding position. They're in the same position when you're looking at them. So first off, if I look at this group of 4 at the top, okay, out of that group of 4, if I'm trying to describe where angle 2 is located, I probably would say that angle 2 is at the top right position, again, out of that group of 4. Next, if I look at this other bottom group of 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and if I talk about, again, which one is in the top right position, that would be angle 6. So on the picture, angle 2 and angle 6 are corresponding. They're both in that top right position. Okay, we can state that there are other pairs of corresponding angles in the picture as well. So we also have angle 7 and angle 3. 7 and 3 are going to both be in that bottom right position. They're going to be congruent. So we can add angle 3 and angle 7. Okay, other ones that are corresponding, I'm going to run around my paper, but we can still talk about it at least. Angles 4 and angle 8, they're both in the bottom right position, so they're going to be corresponding, they're going to be congruent. And then finally we have angle 1 and angle 5. Those are both two angles in the top left position, so they're in the same position, they're going to be corresponding. Okay, so we have two of them left here. Vertical angles are angles that have a common vertex and their sides are opposite rays. So if I look at angle 2 in the picture here, and I trace angle 2, here's the vertex for angle 2, here's one side, and there is the other. So the angle that's vertical with 2 also has to have the same vertex. So the vertex has to be there, and the sides have to go in opposite direction. So if you see here, I have one side of angle 2 is going to the right, so the vertical angle has to go to the left. If one side of angle 2 is kind of going toward the top right, the other one has to go toward the bottom left. So if you look at what I traced in green, that would be angle 4. So in this particular picture, angle 2 and angle 4 are vertical angles. Okay, now there's other pair of vertical angles in the picture as well. So if 2 and 4 are vertical, we can also state that angles 1 and 3 are vertical as well. Okay, notice again they have a common vertex, their sides go in opposite directions. Okay, so we could also have angle 5 and angle 7, those are vertical, as well as, let's see here, angle 6 and angle 8. Okay, so again, there we go, didn't want to do that. So again, when we're looking at the picture, so angles, if I erase what I have here. So angle 6 and angle 8 are vertical. They have a common vertex right here. Their sides are opposite rays. Same thing can be said about angles 5 and 7. Now, last thing we have are congruent angles. So we spent majority of the time, the first how many weeks, of talking about transformations. So what we're trying to do is explain with transformations which angles would be congruent or which angles look congruent. So hopefully if we just pause for a moment, and you think, which angles look like they could be congruent in the picture? Okay, so if I pause for a moment. So the angles that I think look congruent could possibly be like angles 2 and angle 6. Okay, other ones that look congruent to me are like angles 1 and angle 3, or angle 6 and angle 8. Just there's a variety of angles in the picture that look congruent. So what we're going to do here on the last part of this worksheet here is talk about what types of angles are congruent, and then can you describe their congruency based on transformations. Okay, so if I scroll down here to the bottom of this page, went too far. Okay, so we're going to talk about types of angles that are congruent. So one type of angle, name-wise in the picture, that's going to be congruent are your corresponding angles. Okay, now, if you think of the picture, if I take one of the angles and I slide it down, okay, we could be able to explain congruency for corresponding angles as just a translation. We're sliding an angle up or sliding an angle down to match up, and it should match up perfectly. They would have the same degree. Another type of angle that is congruent is, besides your corresponding, is going to be your vertical angles. Okay, vertical angles are also congruent. Now, one of the ways we would probably talk about why vertical angles are congruent most likely is a rotation. If I would take, for example, angle 1, I would rotate it 180 degrees about the vertex, it would end up in angle 3's position. So since they match up perfectly, they're going to be congruent. Okay, another type of congruent angle in the picture is going to be your alternate interior angles. ALT-INT for alternate interior. And alternate interior angles are congruent. One of the reasons we can explain why they are congruent is by a rotation as well. Okay, if I rotate the angles, they should match up. It's going to be about 180 degrees. And if you think the center of rotation is probably going to be located kind of midway between those two parallel lines. Now, the last pair of angles that are congruent as well are going to be your alternate exterior angles. Okay, alternate exterior angles are also congruent, and my main reason for that is going to be a rotation as well. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a basic idea of the different pairs of angles. What I'm asking you to do next is the back side, or the second paper, I should say, since I didn't get it copied front and back. You're going to do the Let's Move part 2 here on this particular page, but you just won't have a partner to work with. You'll just be working on your own. This one gets a little more complicated. Notice something to take in consideration on the back side here is that you have two different pairs of parallel lines here. So for number 3, when you're listing out angles, you're going to focus on lines A and B being parallel. So when you're naming the angles, one thing I want you to do is when you're naming like corresponding angles, focus on this group of 4 here that I circled, or also focus on I shouldn't say group of 4, group of 8, and then focus on this group of 8. So if I'm comparing angles, If you're picking an angle in the blue oval, you need to pick another angle in the blue oval. If you pick an angle in the maroon oval, you need to pick another one in the maroon oval. So that should give you a little idea of that one. And then for number 4, you're working on the other pair being parallel. So in this one, you're focusing on, in number 4 again, you're focusing on C and D being parallel. So again, if you're grouping pairs of angles, you're going to look at this group of 8, not 4, sorry, on this side, and then you're going to focus on this group of 8 here as well. Okay, so when you finish this worksheet, you will be ready to move on to the next video.